Hello, fellow readers. My name is Greg, and this is Ghost Readers in the Sky. I wanted to talk to you today about a book I read this week, a nonfiction work by J.B.Zielke called The Lost Cowboy. It's about his time working with livestock on all 6 continents. He started off in Australia. He's an American. He grew up in Wyoming, farmed and ranched there, did rodeo up through college, so had some experience with the American way of working cattle and horses, but was exposed to a lot of new ideas and methods and people. He went first to Australia, way up in the northeast corner, Cape York, working almost exclusively with Aboriginal people and fairly wild cattle that just are out on the range. Is it the outback? Yeah, sure. But pretty wild cattle, and covering such a large range that they use trucks and helicopters and all kind of crazy things to take care of these cattle. He comes across ants that the kind that really hurt when they bite you. Green ants, I think they were. Also crocodiles and snakes and all those things in Australia that can kill you, which is almost everything, it seems like, to those of us from far away. After Australia, he went to Argentina. He started out on a guest ranch, and that didn't really work for him very well, but somebody that he met there was in the southern part of Argentina. Somebody he met there had relatives in the northern part of Argentina, and so he went up there and worked on a more traditional cattle ranch, but out in the middle of nowhere, one of those places that was 4 hours from town if you could get your truck out through the mud. Just a completely different, going from a fairly, very motorized way of taking care of cattle to everything done on horseback and done with, the saddles, the tack, everything was pretty much handmade. Just a very different, very low tech, very low cost way of doing things. After that, he went to Sweden, which is probably the most high-tech and most efficient operation that he's found with cattle. Also very highly regulated in Sweden. And so there were a lot of things that we do here in the U.S. that was not allowed, like roping cattle, not allowed. They had very strict data requirements, having to catalog everything, having to catalog all of the vaccinations, having to catalog just everything that happens to every single animal. They can only be pulled in certain kinds of trailers and certain roads. Really fascinating, but extraordinarily efficient. The Swedes, he said, are just, efficiency matters to them a lot. And so they have worked to use as much technology as is needed to make an effective and efficient way of raising cattle. He went from there to South Africa, in the remote part of South Africa, kind of near Lesotho, and all large cattle ranges owned pretty much exclusively by white people who were still, many of whom were still angry about the end of apartheid. Well, a lot of them still angry about the Boer War, the English descendants and the Dutch descendants Still didn't really want to talk to each other much. Uh, the best cattle people that he found out there were from Lesotho, which is a very small, very mountainous country that is completely surrounded by South Africa. Some really fascinating things there. He went into Mexico, into Chihuahua, and on a fairly remote ranch, probably closest to the way that cattle are run here in the U.S. Certainly the Spanish brought horses, and so there's a lot of ties between how across the Americas, from Argentina through Central America and into Mexico and up into the U.S. and into Canada, that there are a lot of similarities with the way people ride, with the tack, everything else. But again, working in rural Mexico was and among fairly poor conditions. Not a lot of expense was used to take care of these cattle. It was people who worked really hard. And again, a lot of talk about going back and forth across the border, both before and after the first Trump administration. So some really interesting politics there. He finished up in Mongolia. This was the part that surprised me. I had read on the cover of the book, or the blurb, that he spent time with reindeer. I also read that he was in Sweden. I assumed he would work with reindeer in Sweden, up in the north part, up where the Sami are, because they are certainly the reindeer culture that I'm most familiar with, the Sami people from Norway, Sweden, Finland, into Russia, but that very northern part of Europe there. But no, he didn't work with reindeer in Sweden. He worked with reindeer in Mongolia. There is a fairly small group of people who still have a reindeer culture in the high mountains in the far north of Mongolia, and he spent time there working with reindeer, and then finished up again on a guest ranch outside one of the major cities there in Mongolia. A lot of open country, a lot of solo travelers who he just helped them get the things they needed and gave them a map and sent them off. They had his phone number so they could call in. Anyway, all of that to say that he came through all of these different experiences, and we learn a lot about livestock. We learn a lot about how people treat livestock, how livestock are valued, how the people who work with livestock are valued, but so many cultural and political nuances, well, sometimes not even nuanced, just blatant, about how the cultural norms make a difference, how the political norms make a difference, how people treated him differently as an American in different countries, how he got over the language barriers when he did, what he did when he got lost, because that happens more than once, or what happens when he gets robbed, which happens more than once. He does build some really strong friendships. A lot of times, though, he's out of range of anybody who can really help him, except the people who are right there. He doesn't have phone service, cell service. He does go into a lot of bars, has some bar fights, has some pretty rowdy times, has some pretty rowdy people around him. All of the stories just really work together. So he's got a travelogue. He's got a book about him maturing over these, I don't know how long it was. It must have been 3 or 4 years anyway, after he was out of college. So he's in his early to mid-20s, learning all of these things and using livestock and using his background in working with livestock and raising livestock, primarily raising cattle and horses, to learn about the world. I just thought it was an absolutely fascinating book. It won the Spur Award last year for Best Contemporary Nonfiction and also for Best First Nonfiction Work. Um, just a really strong book, and it's worth reading. Not something I had heard much about. I've seen a little bit as I've done some digging on YouTube, found some interviews with him, and so there's a little bit out there, but certainly not a well-known name, not a well-known book. But I would encourage you to grab it. I think it's a great nonfiction book. The stories are fantastic. The ideas behind it and the goals behind it really make a lot of sense to me. And I hope you find a way to pick up The Lost Cowboy. Give it a read. Thanks so much for tuning in once again to this episode of Ghost Readers in the Sky. And until next time, my name is Greg. Keep on reading.